Dr. Alison Manza, attorney at law and author, Mr. Alan Lewis, Managing Director, Jane Fund Managers Limited, Mr. Ricardo Distant, Chief Digital Transformation and Special Projects at Jane Bank, Mr. Winston Wilkins, Lead Research Analyst, MC Systems, a member of the Jane Group, members of the Jane Fund Managers team and wider Jane Group teams, other Jane Group representatives, Jane Fund Managers clients, ladies and gentlemen, good evening, and thank you all for attending this client event dubbed Welcome to the Metaverse, which is aimed at educating you about the Metaverse and the pros and cons of the technology. My name is Michael Andre Collins, manager of the Youth Banking Unit at Jane Bank, a member of the Jane Group, and it is my pleasure to give today's proceedings the usual guidance as we go along with today's activities. Now, ladies and gentlemen, as social media entrepreneur, Matt Mullenweg said once, technology is best when it brings people together. Indeed, this is true, as this virtual event today is a testament to that. But before we begin, it's our tradition at the Jamaica National Group to start our proceedings with blessings from above. I invite Mr. Hugh Miller, Head of Asset Management, Jane Fund Managers, to ask the Lord's blessing of our meeting. Mr. Miller.
Thank you. Good evening all. Let us just quiet our hearts, bow our heads, and we just pray. Lord, we come to you once more. We certainly want to thank you for just the way in which you have kept us over the last 2 years, especially as we have sought to carry on our lives during the pandemic. Lord, you have kept us, our clients, our members, customers, the Jane Group, colleagues. Lord, you have kept well-wishers, friends. Lord, for that we're truly grateful. Lord, and even as we meet this evening, we're not unmindful of those who would have suffered loss during the pandemic. And Lord, we ask that you just bring them comfort at this time. Lord, we also ask for comfort for those who, even as we meet this evening, continue to deal with the issues of residual effects of COVID, as well as other illnesses. Lord, your word says that the ear of the wise seeks knowledge. And indeed, Lord, as we gather this evening, we are here to seek knowledge as relates to the metaverse. So Lord, we just ask that by your enablement, this evening's event will be a resounding success. And at the end of it, all participants can indeed say that it was mutually beneficial. So Lord, we just ask that you just be with us now, we pray. In Jesus' name, amen.
Thank you, sir, so much, Mr. Miller. Thank you so much for that wonderful prayer. And indeed, we're all here in one space. Thanks be to God. But ladies and gentlemen, our guest speaker, Dr. Alison Manza, is a partner in the Banking and Specialty Finance Group and Business Law Practice at Cassels, based in Toronto. She has developed expertise in a wide range of practice areas, combining skills to work effectively in most corporate and commercial practice areas, with a focus on financial services and structured transactions. Her recent experience includes blockchain and fintech applications, ladies and gentlemen. You heard me right. Her cross-border expertise has led to several leadership roles in the leading United States business law organizations, such as the American College of Commercial Finance Lawyers and the American Bar Association. She has written many books on legal topics, primarily in areas of banking and finance, specialized finance that is, and routinely lectures and speaks on a wide range of topics. Ladies and gentlemen, I invite Dr. Alison Manza to make her presentation at this moment.
Thank you so much, and thank you as host for inviting me to make this presentation. It is an area of sort of some considerable interest. The first thing that I'm going to do is something that very few publishers in social media and in the press ever do for you, is that I'm going to set what I want to talk about within my lens, my context, the way that I look at things. Because what most of you by now are realizing with much of what you're seeing over the last few years, how you position yourself and how you use something will very much affect the way in which you define it, look at it, and talk about it. So for this particular topic, I would like it to be quite clear that I am not a number of things. I am not a gamer. I am not a gambler. I am not a coder, and I am not a tech fanatic. Rather, I am someone who has had 44 years of experience in the business world, largely from a legal viewpoint, but not exclusively. Both my MBA and my doctorate obviously are in business administration. I look at topics where there is emerging technology based upon its business use. My business use and my business interest is heavily capital markets, investment, finance, and financial services. I'm hoping that that is a suitable framework for most of this audience. The second sort of prejudice that I tend to bring to these talks is that the audience actually knows more about the topic than you realize. In the vast majority of cases, again, learned over a very long period of time, I have discovered that notwithstanding the enthusiasm, most frequently of the youth, most of the emerging things that come across their desk and gain sort of instant incredibility to them are really not terribly new. And they're building upon the building blocks of foundations that have evolved over a period of time, increasingly quickly, I will admit, in recent decades, but they still require the foundation for growth. If you recognize that something is built on a foundation, it becomes a lot easier for you to, first of all, understand it, and then understand how to use it in the business enterprises that you're working with. So the first thing that, in terms of looking at this, I thought as I was going to try and explain the metaverse to you, is to have you realize that this is simply an advancement in communication. That's why I like that early introduction that discussed about technology and communication, because it is really, truly only an advancement in communication. Humans, for effectively the entire existence of human beings, have known how to create, understand, and manipulate representations of reality. From the cave drawings that were created by the artist, through to the written word, and now more increasingly more visual means of communication, we have been representing reality using communication tools. That ability to communicate in the earlier stages, and in fact, really, when you think about it, up until very recent decades, was on a very individual basis. A piece of art, a set of words, it is very difficult for an individual to understand the context in which it was created, the vision that the person created had, and to get a community of understanding around what it is trying to say, a very individual delivery. The evolution from individual to shared understanding occurred as we were able to present a more visual picture just to supplement. So in circumstances where I have a book with solid illustrations, say a cookbook that has very effective illustrations of the preparation, I'm going to have a better understanding of what it is attempted to be communicated. That is really what has been happening in recent years as we have technology evolving in the communication side of things. The next step, and the step that is being started at this point in time, is interaction, because human communication improves as you move from the individual to the shared to the interactive. Because when you can interact, you create that cycle of understanding as the matter to be communicated goes from one to the other. And in addition, is enhanced significantly when you have another key element, which is that 90% of human communication is not from word, not from verbal word or from written word. It is from the nonverbal signals that we give through our posture, our reactions, our facial expressions. And that to date has been largely missing in more mass communication. The metaverse is designed to attempt to resolve that difficulty, to attempt to enhance our method of communication. The definition that seems to come up sort of most often, they call it a summary, is that it is a natural evolution of the internet that allows spaces to be populated by digital avatars. I can tell you whoever wrote that definition doesn't have the same view or context as I do. They are clearly either a gamer or a coder. So in terms of the way that I look at it, because I look at it as an enhanced communication skill, What the metaverse is an attempt to use technological means to improve the presence of an individual within the communication environment that's being used. What do you mean by that? Well, what the metaverse is attempting to do is to use technology in a manner that allows a person that is giving or receiving communication to be more what they call present in that communication. The way that that is done, it's done by using hardware, usually glasses or some similar. You remember when you used to go to the theater when they had those movies and you put on the 3D glasses? Everybody kind of remembers that. It was horrible. Either you got sick in the aisle because it was disorienting, or it really didn't deliver the experience. But the idea behind a metaverse experience initially is that it is going to use a mix of internet computer-based communication with the ability to use the now new generation of those types of glasses, which are going to allow you to see things not as a flat screen that sort of looks like it's got depth, but truly as if you were working your way into the depth. And the idea behind that is that by using this combination of technology, virtual reality, augmented reality, video, and an immersive type of hardware device, that you are actually going to be able to work with digital communication in a very different way than we are right now. As advanced as this is, and I never in my life felt that I was going to be spending 2 years of my life essentially in Zoom meetings, a Zoom meeting is still a flat, difficult to work with communication. The metaverse intends to take this to the next level and to create the ability of people to be able to much more directly and much more visually react with each other, improving communication and communication opportunities. So the way and what makes this a little bit different is that, again, I'm going to use one of sort of the coders thing. It is about offering a hyper-real alternative world for users to coexist in, making use of blockchain technology in an interoperable virtual world. I don't know about you, but if I was going to a seminar to attempt to learn about something, those words would have me sleep in the aisle and having completely lost track entirely of where we're going. But we're going to use that as a base because there are some key words in there that are going to be somewhat helpful to us. And we're going to layer that onto the concept that the more that humans have the ability to receive or give communication within our normal context, the better that communication is going to work. Our normal context is sitting across the dinner table or across the desk or within the meeting room, where the communication is not just the words and not just the printed presentations, but is also the body language and the way in which people are reacting to both the delivery and the receipt, what they call the clues. And within that, you also have context. Because you were able to sit and get that iterative reactions, you have a context for the delivery of the communication, the information. Another aspect of our normal communication is the more that we can exclude distractive elements, the better our communication is going to be, and the better that we are going to be able to receive, process, and work with the communication that is coming to us. In circumstances where you are sitting in the meeting room, while there are some distractions, and it's quite possible at the dinner table there are even more distractions, when you are sitting with a screen running, the distractions are endless. When communication of information or materials is coming either from written materials or from the screen, I can see around me, all around me, and sitting in an empty room, I still have distractive elements. And those distractive elements tend to intrude because humans tend to react to the immediate. They tend to react to what is happening sort of around them. So it becomes very difficult when you are attempting to deliver your information or communication using the Zoom style of flat screen that we've become used to, or other predecessors to that, to ensure that you are in fact getting the focus and the more direct reaction to what you're giving, because you have the person channeling into what it is that you're doing. So the idea behind the metaverse is that it is going to do a number of different things simultaneously. But keep something in mind. As I said, you already know more about this than you know, because the metaverse is nothing but buckling together a number of other pieces of technology, both software, hardware, into a system that is intended to address just what I've said, which is a better environment for the communication of information. And it doesn't matter if you're a gamer, you are still receiving and giving information. When you are receiving your virtual reality of a game, it is the same as when I'm sitting and doing a lecture to my Masters of Law students. It is a communication of information that is allowing you to use that information for some purpose. So when I dismiss the gamers and gambling, by the way, I don't entirely dismiss it. Many of my clients are in that industry, and many of them are getting a great deal richer than I am doing that. So the idea then behind the metaverse is that what is going to happen is that there is going to be a delivery of communication that will permit people to interact. And the way that it does that is a number of features, I'm going to call them for now. So I'm going to call them features. And so what is happening is that you are going to use a piece of hardware. It is generally at this point in time some kind of immersive glasses. So these are things that are going to wrap right around so that all that you can see is what is in front of you through those glasses. It's going to exclude things that are around you. So what you are going to be doing is you are going to be receiving the same types of information. You are going to be receiving digitally created information that is delivered to you by technology through the internet, generally using blockchain, using a computer interface. None of that changes. And you all understand how to do that because you were able to log in and come onto the Zoom call. So I know for a fact that you know all of those various elements, other than the possibility that you may have avoided in your lifetime putting on those immersive glasses. So all that's going to be happening is that you are going to be getting the communication in that manner. The differences that it creates are what I call the features. First of all, what is happening in a metaverse style concept, and by the way, the metaverse now is fairly significantly an idea more than an actual delivery reality. Each one of the underpinnings to it exists. The hardware exists. The computerized capability of delivering information exists. The ability of computers to talk to each other exists. It's called the internet, in case you were wondering. The blockchain technology that can provide the safety and sounds, these all exist. But what hasn't been able to be done yet is to buckle them together in a way that the metaverse is being envisioned. So the idea of the features of a metaverse are, first of all, that there will be consistent context. Remember, we talked about context. Unless you have an ability to understand context, and preferably that you have consistent context, it's very difficult to effectively communicate. Because if people are seeing or hearing the images or words differently, then there is not going to be an understanding between them. So the first thing is a consistent context, and that's done by creating an immersive environment in the metaverse. The belief is that if you are undistracted, being effectively brought into, we'll call it a stage, a universe, a room, you're coming into an environment where in a 3D style, you're seeing the same things. You're seeing yourself and others in the same context. Everyone is viewing things in the same manner. And the difference between that and reading the same words in a book is the richness of what you're surrounded with gives you a feeling for everything that is involved. So that gives you a consistency of context. Unlike the written word, where much of what you get from reading the written word is your own imagination, your own way of viewing and seeing things. Because the context has been built for you, it's the same as if you walk into a room. We all see the same room in basically the same way. Consistency of context. The next is that the metaverse intends to be able to use, whether it's full avatars or, I'll get you to the exciting part, potentially holograms. It is believed that the Star Trek hologram thing will actually be with us within another 5 to 10 years. But at the very least, there will be within the metaverse the capability of creating and using AI-aided avatars. At present, most of the avatars that are available are basically sort of still cartoon style avatars. They may have movement, but they'll be computer generated movement. The belief is within a relatively short period of time, when I put those glasses on, I'm also going to be putting sensors on parts of my body. And these things exist now. They absolutely exist, that you can put sensors on, and those sensors can end up being able to figure out my human clues. My facial expressions can be seen, my body movements can be seen, my reactions can be seen. The normal clues that we use to be able to appropriately communicate within the group will be available in a digital form. You know it exists if you've watched any of the documentaries that show how the cartoons that are now created, like the movie Avatar, how they were created was using precisely that technology. So the technology exists. The idea is that it will become more available. And therefore, when I'm sitting and talking to you, and as you can tell, I'm a fairly animated speaker, people will be able to see that and react to it. They'll be able to see the guy sleeping in the corner is not moving and the others are. So the human clues that we need for the most effective communication will be available. Reactivity. The idea of the metaverse is that you are going to have a multiple number of people able to effectively simultaneously communicate. We can't really do that with Zoom. You can to some extent if people want to talk over each other and somebody will unmute them to allow them to do it. But in the metaverse, the whole idea is it is if you are in a room and you're going to be openly communicating, so that each of the separate devices is going to be feeding into a central, what they call universe, metaverse. And so people will be able to directly and immediately communicate and react. So reactivity is going to be enhanced over what it might be from this flat screen discussion that we're having. Interoperability is going to be the real key. And interoperability means that you can take disparate devices on different platforms and you can move your experience from platform to platform, that you're going to be able to create a universe in one platform. So I'm in a room, and I'm going to give this some reality in a minute, by the way, when I talk about the business uses. When I'm in that room, I am creating sort of environment reality and communicating with people in that room. The metaverse pundits believe that the way in which this is going to be best enhanced is if I can take what I've created and I own this and I have an ID to this, I can move it to another environment. So I can take that environment and communicate with somebody else or with a different group by moving it. Gaming hasn't quite gotten there because gaming is either group or bilateral and doesn't move interoperably. And as you know, much of the blockchain is not. Of all of the now thousands of basically blockchain branches, they don't talk to each other. And so, for example, if you've got one type of cryptocurrency, you can't even move it to another chain. The idea with the metaverse is going to be a much more flexible and open way of being able to take the IDs, that is the identification, the universes you create, and move them to others. Depth of experience, that is the immersibility aspect. The metaverse, you will, when you are wearing this hardware and you're communicating using an internet-based system with others, it is going to feel to you as if you were actually in there, because your mind will be tricked into the belief that you are in this new virtual world. I know at least some of you have probably played the virtual games. I will admit I have not. I said I'm not a gamer, but when I spoke to one of my partners to find out about this, he has used these devices and he says it is really quite remarkable. Even if you've just used a Wii to kind of come into something, you're going to feel much more like you're actually in it. So depth of immersion and immersibility is a key feature of what they're calling the metaverse. Exclusion, the ability to create focus using hardware and using the experience as an overall basis. The intention is that you will not be able to be distracted because the devices that you will use will be ones where your sole interface and reaction will be within that digital environment. That is a huge aspect of what they're calling the metaverse, which is when you're in it, you are to be in it. You're not to be sitting at your desk now where I can look here and see this, I can look there and see that. You will only be able to be immersed within that environment. Again, very important. Portability, the ability for you to own and move your identification. Participation, multiple systems being able to come together and to actually discuss and move with each other. And a final element, which is not one that you might necessarily think, but the metaverse developers are very, very key on one thing, and that is control, that is user control. not control by an intermediary, but user control. The metaverse is being designed around individuals being able to control who they are, how they present, and the environments in which they're working, obviously on a consensus basis where you have got multiple parties using the same space. So the keys that are believed to be necessary for success and for dealing with the social issues are identification, and identification really will be linked to the single user that is coming into it. They may present in different ways, they may have multiple avatars, but it must come back to a single identifiable user. Control and safety. These are elements that are being looked at as being key to the success of the metaverse. So where do you go next? How is this more than a game? Because all I'm describing to you now is probably an environment in which you can go in and create yourself as, a blue avatar and, interact with people. Well, it actually is much more than a game. I would have no interest other than if it was client in terms of gaming. What it really is it's enhancing and expanding the capabilities of digital representation. Digital representation is something we're becoming quite used to. Cryptocurrencies are a digital representation, I guess in many cases of simply a thought or an idea because there's nothing backing it, but in other cases it's a digital representation of some kind of currency equivalent asset. NFTs are a digital representation of some unique or individual aspect of art or something similar. And tokens, for example, for the securities exchanges are a digital representation of securities. And just as a reminder, digital representations of things are not new. Whenever I've got somebody going, oh, wow, there's a whole brave new world, this is really odd and strange, there's this whole digital asset thing, I say one simple sentence. When was the last time you saw a share certificate? So things have been digitized for a very long time, but the advances that are being made in the metaverse concepts will give us the next sort of advancement in the tech world. Meta simply is more. It is more context, more richness, more interaction, more engagement. So taking away the technical things that sit behind it, that's what it's about. It's about creating better communication. Now that means that gaming and entertainment are certainly going to benefit because I have a very serious gamer son. So I am well aware of just how important that world is to certain people. And there's no question that if you have an investment interest, the use of metaverse is going to take gaming and entertainment to the next level. There is no question about that. It is going to become much more immediate, much more immersive, and probably, quite frankly, much more addictive, which is one of the concerns we'll talk about momentarily. But it has many other uses. This digital advancement is a significant advancement in communication. And what do we need communication for? We need it for things such as the giving of a press conference. We need it for things such as a trade show. You need it for things such as the next phase of online shopping. If instead of simply looking at a flat photograph on the Amazon, even if it's got, 2 or 3 flips of it, it's very, very difficult to tell if I really like those shoes or I really want that purse. But on the other hand, if I can be in an immersive experience where I've got a showroom around me and I can see the showroom in 3D and I've got the salesperson there, so I can ask the salesperson to turn something around or to hold it up to them, or for that matter, if I have an avatar, to be able to hold it up to me or to be able to start working in that basis, it is a completely different communication system. Heavy, heavy use expected in that environment. Sales, marketing, press conferences and communication, trade shows and that type of thing. It will allow, as I've said, you can get to the stage where with this technology, you can have effectively, a room the size of a conference center populated by all of these different avatars, all of which are going to be capable of interacting with each other. Very big in that way. In some ways, it's even more important in areas that you might not think of. And these are the areas which, by the way, are already using it. The technology is being used in the automotive industry and in the aircraft industry. And it is being used at a rudimentary level, what I've sort of described to you as being where things are intended to get to. In those industries, it is being used for things such as a global engineering team being able to work together on a very immediate basis, working within the same environment and being able to, in a 3D basis, manipulate, move, and change design aspects or assembly line aspects, these types of things. It's being used for that. It's being used by the Mayo Clinic and Johns Hopkins for the purpose of being able to look at working with complex surgeries and effectively pre-doing the surgery in a way that really no one can get harmed. To the best of my knowledge yet, although I have seen some of the sci-fi shows where they speculate that avatars can be killed, at this stage, as far as I know, they really cannot be killed back in the real world. So they are using it for things such as looking at the exploration of complex surgeries and pre-practicing them. They're using it for purposes such as training hazardous materials handlers, firefighters, people who are working with bomb disposal, that they can come in a much more immersive manner than reading a manual or looking at pictures or standing back, kind of maybe watching a demonstration, or if they're scattered, to be all able to see the same demonstration. They can manipulate and work with a 3D representation of what it is that they're attempting to learn. So this virtual reality, alternate reality, the ability to immerse within a verse. So when they use the word metaverse, by the way, it doesn't mean sort of anything other than the fact they're intending to create a contained environment in which you are getting only what it is created within that environment. That's really what they mean when they talk about that universe. And by doing that, you're going to get an ability to enhance learning and teaching. Manufacturing, healthcare, education companies are all looking at this to do an improved teaching over the use of manuals, the ability to show complex concepts in a very real-time environment, to be able to provide for collaboration essentially on a global basis. The defense industry is using it for the capability of bringing together global defense teams to actually simulate and work in the real world. At this present moment in time, having donated to yet another Ukrainian charity, I'm not entirely certain how pro I am on that concept, but that is what's being used and done. So the defense system is using it. In other words, what is it? It's a better way of getting people to be able to learn the things they need to learn, communicate the things they need to communicate. Research has shown that there is an enormous enhancement in learning capability when you have it focused, when you have it capable of interaction and manipulation. Some of the keys uses as well for those that are looking for areas to invest. Obviously, hardware is becoming greatly enhanced, but a number of the technologies that will enhance the capability of the metaverse evolving are also worthy to look at. And I've written some materials which I understand are going to be sent out to you. One of the areas that I mentioned earlier is that the key is ensuring that identification is owned, controlled, and protected. And that is going to be an area where there's going to be some very significant advancement over time. One of the leaders happens to be a good friend of mine and a client. And so I get to mention it because I think if you want to have some fun about seeing what might be done on an easier to understand basis, Liquid Avatar started out as being, a cryptocurrency Visa platform and then evolved into an anti-money laundering platform. But then they realized it'd be a lot more fun if they gave anti-money laundering control capabilities to users using avatars. And so that is kind of a first step into the metaverse, which is they're giving users control over their AML information, and they're doing it in a much more fun way by working with avatars and now with NFTs that are backed by those avatars. So the issues of control and so on do have to be understood. I'm going to do a fairly quick run through, mostly because I've probably run over time, a very quick run through sort of some of the abuses and controls, because I think you now understand that all that the metaverse is going to be is buckling together a number of different technologies that are going to allow you to have a better, more immediate, more reactive communication process that can be used for sales and marketing and training and education and gaming and gambling. The difficulty is that we've got a number of things we have to be concerned about. And the first one is that this has a potential to be a very harmful method of communication. Because it is so immersive, is going to take the abuses that we're already aware of in social media, particularly for young people, and make it much more significant. When you get into an immersive environment of this type, particularly with the young, where they're still impressionable and not necessarily capable of being able to divorce what it is that they're seeing or hearing in this social media sort of environment, which is what it can be, and the real world. So you can end up with exacerbating some of the mental health problems that social media delivery has been identifying over the past while. Another factor of that is that because, again, you're in an immersive environment, cyber attack threats become very real. Number one, it can be that there can be interference with the delivery system. A lot of people don't realize that what the initial incentive that drove the development of the internet was the sharing of pornography. And this is an even bigger problem in this immersive environment. So how are you going to deal with adult content? How are you going to deal with measuring this out in an environment that is even more immersive than somebody watching a flat picture on a screen? Malicious activity can be eavesdropping, can be watching, because again, in this environment, you're inviting people to come in and out of the environment. That's the whole idea of the metaverse, is you're creating an interactive type of environment. It can greatly increase the ability of stalking and oversight. And another problem, and this is one that I hadn't really thought about until I spoke to some of the people that have used at the very preliminary reality sort of goggles, if you want to call them, but you become completely immersed. And if you end up in a situation where someone can become aware of your environment or surroundings, you can get directed into harmful activities and you won't even know it. You can be directed, towards a set of stairs and fall down the stairs. You can be directed out into traffic, these types of things, because you truly become, one with your environment. You can't see your real world. So you end up with what is the very point of this, the immersive experience that can create an environment of both psychological and of physical harm. The only thing that has been discussed for the metaverse so far and how to protect that is not regulation, it's not law, it is identity. It is about the ability of ensuring that the user has capability of owning, controlling, and being able to manipulate and guard their own identity, which is why I mentioned something like the liquid avatar and these technologies that are trying to be developed for exactly that purpose. And then I'm going to throw in my last concern, which is not one that I found in anything that I was looking at to get ready for this one, which is my personal concern. I don't have a self-driving car for a reason. The reason I don't have a self-driving car is, I don't know about you, but when I'm using my computer, if I type 2 keys in a row too quickly, the darn thing crashes. I frequently end up in circumstances where I get technology failures. I have watched over and over the very real problems. I currently have a project I'm acting on, $14.5 billion project that is dependent upon a key piece of software routing certain specific information to turn machines off and on. We are now in year 3 of $14 billion sitting unworking because they can't get the code right. And if I've got one of the supposedly best coders in the world, and they can't get something as relatively simple as how to turn these machines off and on at the right time correct, how could I possibly have confidence that, for example, all of the coding that they've done to create that environment, to create that operation, to create what the inner of that person is going to look like is correct? So I warn you, like any technologies, it will have coding faults and it will have problems and issues. But the metaverse itself is a simple concept. We're going to improve the ability to communicate among humans. And that's the main thing you have to remember. All of the technology for it exists. They're just buckling it together. Hopefully that gives you a bit of a clue where we're going. I know the panel is going to bring some reality to that from your very direct world. Thank you.
And thank you too, Dr. Manza, for that informative presentation. It's a lot we've taken into, we've seen the chat blowing up already, if you're able to follow it, to see what some of our viewers are saying. But of course, you don't have a Tesla.
No, although I do have a friend who did get across the bridge between the mainland and Vancouver, absolutely blitz drunk, and convinced the cops not to give him a ticket because technically the car was self-driving.
And some of those legal terminologies will come in effect when dealing with the metaverse and, of course,
It's
the
quite
virtual
possible.
reality of what it is. Of course, augmented technology is what we're talking about. I'm sure our audience has some questions for you. So at this time, what I'm going to be doing is allowing them to be able to ask you all these questions. And I hope there's nobody's going to be asking about, can we actually use avatars to like create a family dinner? You know, stuff like that, where we're in our own homes, but we're using avatars at mom's or grandma's house, where she's teaching us how to do the best pot roast, right?
Yeah,
That's
there
something
is
that we think about.
absolutely no question that it will become very rapidly moving out of the Fortune 500 companies and into your dining room. And that is exactly one of the uses that a lot of people are describing as being suitable for the metaverse, which is Jamaicans not, although you have a large diaspora here in Toronto. So as you get spread out families, it would be, I think, a much better experience to be able to have at least something where you can feel a bit like you're close to. One of the things that I said I would talk to you about is there is a very firm belief that the hardware technology that is being developed will be capable of broadcasting holograms, and that will give an even more of a feel. Although I don't think hugging a hologram is the same as hugging your grandmother, but it will give more of a feel. So the answer is yes, it will undoubtedly get to the family dining room. I saw someone ask a question about cost of hardware.
Yes.
The belief is that because the overall industry is going to be so enormous, that it will be along the same lines. Certainly, now, by the way, I'm also never a first iteration of technology buyer because you pay stupid prices and get ridiculous bugs. But the belief is that it will come within the capability of the average person to buy. These visual goggles, at least as long as you're just looking for the visual goggle as opposed to, you know, everything tracking movements, is expected that it will come in, you know, in the couple of $100 range, that type of thing. It is intended to be available for the general person. The whole idea behind rolling out the metaverse is to get volume. And as soon as it's getting volume and participation, you need to make the hardware affordable. That's only, that's one I noted. They're coming up and going too quickly for me to pick them up.
Most definitely. And I'm seeing here where, you know, we saw a comment that we should be using this technology, for example, to do virtual tours of houses. So the real estate industry would be one such area that will use that. And of course, there's a talk about how now it will transcend into the use of business, cryptocurrencies, and all those sorts of stuff in the movement of, you know, it's mimicking life, virtual reality. So I'm going to be asking our you know, our persons here online. You can actually open your microphone and you can actually ask questions.
I picked up two questions as well, though. One was asking whether it is anticipated that the affordability will be within the range of, say, charitable organizations, where it could be a very valuable tool. And the answer is yes, absolutely. Keep in mind that the intention is that this will be delivered by computers using the internet, potentially, you know, the next iteration of internet, which it's a little unclear. Most of it's simply being blockchain developed. So it is purely the same laptop that you've been using for everything else. And instead of its Bluetooth talking to, you know, a little earpiece, it's going to talk to these headsets. And as I said, the headsets are going to be sitting in the range. So you're going to be using the same internet and the same computers. You're going to be buying these, you know, headphone thingies that, you know, wrap around your eyes. But that's about it. So the answer is the metaverse is not going to be excluded by cost in terms of its access. The other question is there a limit to the metaverse?
Limit to the metaverse, right.
And the answer to that was, I don't think so, and I can't see why. I mean, back when they started this crazy idea a couple of decades ago called the internet, I'm sure that people were asking that, but what has been happening, obviously, is that the interconnectability is being, you know, very rapidly developed. Why? The reason it's being very rapidly developed because it's economic for the large providers to do so. It is economic for IBM to provide cloud access. It is economic. And these are industries that work on volume, not on, you know, price points. So they're better off in terms of being able to make sure that the technology rolls out and expands. Keeping in mind, all you're doing is taking all of the stuff we've already got, all the infrastructure we've already got, the internet, maybe the next iteration, W3, but it's still going to be all of the same sorts of things. So it is almost infinite in that you're just buckling some additional hardware, some additional technology, and you're fixing some of the problems of the blockchain. So remember,
Right.
a lot of the backbone behind this is blockchain based. Blockchains don't talk nicely to each other. They don't play well in the sandbox together. And that's one of the issues that, in fact, is being worked on very heavily now by a lot of the DAO and a lot of the Web3 and these types of developers that are looking for a much more open system. They're looking for a more decentralized system. And the only thing that I can see that will be that somebody just picked up on that. Yes, it does not need to drive off the next generation. The next generation, it's believed, will simply make it easier to roll out. It will make it simpler to work with because the decentralization of the next iteration of the web will eliminate some of the difficulties of blockchains effectively talking to each other. And that's already rapidly in progress. The issue is that unless the internet itself, whether it's this iteration or the next or Ethereum or wherever else, has to fix the fundamental problem of energy use. Because of course, the initial blockchain iterations are extremely energy inefficient. And unless and until that's solved, quite frankly, the internet's getting to the end of its capabilities. Probably doesn't need to expand anymore, but it's getting to the end of those capabilities. Those solutions are being worked on. I firmly believe that those will resolve themselves. So the idea will be that if we can solve the energy problem, the metaverse is simply an add-on or a next iteration of what it is we've been doing anyway. And I don't see any particular limits other than the capability of rolling out. There aren't very many places in this world that doesn't have internet access and cell phones. So I don't think that there will be any restriction. I saw one flip up something about Fortune 500 companies. There is been a significant rollout with Fortune 500 companies because many of them are already adopting and using a variation of this in terms of their training, in terms of their collaborative, their team networks and so on, because of course most Fortune 500 companies are global and therefore have greater needs for communication among disparate groups. But I didn't catch the second half of that question, just the first.
Okay. Well, there's a comment in the chat that speaks about the use of the metaverse to actually enhance the contact centers, the call centers. You know, it's a better experience. You'd mentioned that, you know, that is something that we could consider. You know, we are of course, we will be having our panelists on in a short while, and so you'll be able to ask other questions. We invite you to post your questions in the chat. Continue to do so that we can ask our panelists as well as Dr. Menzar to answer your questions. And,
I'll also make another offer as well. I have zero problem with receiving emails with questions.
Sure.
So if someone wants to email, you know, a specific question that's oriented to me, although I think you'll find the panel can answer a lot of things too. I have no trouble with people emailing me. I'm quite happy to respond.
Absolutely. And as such, Dr. Menzar, I'm going to be asking you to drop your email in the chat so that we can actually do that for you.
Oh, then I have to know how to drop an email in a chat.
Absolutely. It's the metaphor, huh? So ladies and gentlemen, you've heard from Dr. Menzar. You've asked your questions. It's quite a bit to absorb at this moment. And we're talking about virtual reality and the future of the world and how we use technology.
I see one of my LLM students has just given us a comment and question, which is lovely to see.
Good. So maybe you want to give a shout out and maybe just answer that question, if you don't mind.
Hodine Williams just sent me a question. He is one of my LLM students here at Osgood. And it was just looking at additional use and the use, particularly in retail banking, which I agree thoroughly. It's going to make it much easier. And there was another question earlier about how can developing countries use this. This is a type of technology that can be developed, enhanced, and worked everywhere. I see both opportunities for highly educated, some developing countries have highly educated populations that can be used to help contribute to this, but more it's going to be able to get education in a much more immersive manner out to the population. There we go. Now I got to stop.
Great. I'm going to give you one more comment, one more chance to speak on another issue. That would be if you could comment on the privacy issues.
That is the back door, if you wish, of the identification. Remember what I said, the key to this is identification. And identification has got a number of aspects to it, but the most key one is if you control your identity, if you control the use of your identity, what is released and what is discussed or shown of your identity, you control your privacy. And privacy means different things to different people. So that's the more key way of going about it, is not to have some blanket, here's what privacy means. It is more to give you control over what you are prepared to allow the world to know or see in terms of your identity. And that's the orientation that metaverse developers are going towards.
All right. So thank you so much, Dr. Menza, for your responses. And of course, all those persons who placed your questions in the chat, we continue to encourage you to do so. So please continue to drop the questions. I'm seeing several coming in. The panelists are viewing and we'll pick up on those as you post them. So, of course, at this time, we'll now go into our panel discussion. So our panelists this evening will discuss how technology can be helpful while doing business and the potential danger, you see the questions coming in already, it may pose if not managed properly. With us this evening are experts from the Jane member companies who are highly knowledgeable and experts in their respective fields, subject matter experts. Our first panelist is Winston Wilkins, lead research analyst, MC Systems, the technology company of the Jamaica National Group. Mr. Wilkins is responsible for research at MC Systems, which entails keeping up to speed with world-class innovative solutions, conferring and exchanging ideas with team members. Our second panelist is Ricardo Distant, Chief Digital Transformation and Special Projects at Jane Bank, the third largest commercial bank in Jamaica. Mr. Distant is responsible to ensure consistency in our members' experience across all channels as we continue to transition our members to increase usage of electronic channels while continuing the build out of our consultative branch model. You're invited to be prepared to take notes and also to send us your questions in the chat as mentioned before. Our moderator of the discussion segment is Alan Lewis. He's our Managing Director of Jane Fund Managers. Mr. Lewis is an astute, dynamic, and experienced financial services professional whose 30-year career has spanned all types of markets and has an excellent track record of developing and leading teams to achieve results. Ladies and gentlemen, I now turn over to Mr. Alan Lewis, and he will take care of the next few minutes for this panel discussion. Mr. Lewis.
Thank you, Michael. Thank you for doing such an awesome job of moderating the first part. And thank you, Dr. Menza. I hope you will still join us because we see you as part of the discussion. We'll start with Winston. Winston, can you share with us your own perspectives of the metaverse and how the metaverse intersects technology and the underlying technologies that Dr. Menza mentioned? And if you can, with any application or specific examples in Jamaica.
Okay, sure, no problem. Thanks everyone for having me. I'm going to share my screen as a part of a brief presentation that I'm going to make. So let me know when you're seeing my screen.
Go ahead.
Okay, we're viewing now.
Okay, great. So I'm going to be talking a little bit about opportunities and pitfalls of the metaverse. But before that, I want to make mention of a local analogy of the metaverse so that we can understand it. I want to bring our attention to a few years ago when there was this statue in the park, in the Emancipation Park. Everybody was talking about it. Have you seen the statue? What do you guys think? And so a lot of people came to this statue and then they saw the park and they had their opinions of it and they started to share it with other people. It became a site where persons would come to on dates. They would come there to exercise in the mornings, run around the park. Some people would come there to relax because there was a fountain and the sound of water was relaxing to them. It was an immersive experience. after a time, there was a persistent community of locals, of tourists that would come to the park. They would take pictures, they would have conversations, they would participate in this piece of culture. But more importantly, everybody knew where the park was and that there would have been other people there. So if you were an amateur table tennis player, you could go to the park and be assured that there would be somebody playing ping pong at the table and you could just wait your turn and participate. There was always going to be somebody there with something to do that you were interested in. Now, once enough people were there on a consistent basis, you had shops nearby that would offer solutions, goods and services that would serve the needs of the people that were there. If people were thirsty, they could get Coca-Cola. If they were hungry, they could get sweet with jerk pork. If the rain was about to fall, you would have people selling umbrellas. So there was this native economy. And I say native economy because even though the native currency of Jamaica was Jamaican dollars, if you had US dollars on you to exchange for these goods and services, the shops and service providers would gladly accept. Now, what does this have to do with the metaverse? Well, as Dr. Manzer spoke about previously, the metaverse is just the next iteration or the next generation of the internet, where digital experiences start to replace real ones, like the one that we just described with Emancipation Park. But this is what it looks like today. Virtual goggles with persons looking awkward, interacting with the controller, usually in a room in their house in a very confined space. And if they're not careful, they'll bounce into walls and windows and get themselves hurt. So still very early days, but is there a future in this? And the statistics seem to say yes. Oculus Quest, which is the virtual goggles that are displayed here, outsold Xbox in December of 2021. It also dominated Google searches among all gaming consoles around that same time period. That's significant. That's a growing market. That's what a new opportunity in technology looks like. But that's just the immersive experience. What about the persistent community? Well, you have a game like Fortnite, which is developed by a company called Epic Games. In 2017, there were only at 1 million users. But by May of 2020, there are 350 million users. That is fantastic growth in a short space of time, and one that we should be paying attention to as business people, as investors, because this is where our customers are going and we should have a presence there. Creatives and artists understand that. So you have people like Travis Scott that was able to provide a concert in Fortnite about a year ago. And it was fantastically well attended. And it was the first of its kind, but not the last. There have been many events that have been set up in platforms like Fortnite, but there have also been other events that have been happening in other metaverse games, metaverse environments. Now, when you talk about native currencies, the metaverse, and by extension, the internet, is not governed by borders in the traditional sense. And so the currency that you would use on the internet or in the metaverse would be native to the internet. That has so far been what they've been calling cryptocurrency. Now, the gateway to cryptocurrency and a lot of these tokens and items of value within the metaverse have been stored and trading using tools like MetaMask. MetaMask is a mobile wallet or an app that is stored on your phone that keeps track of the cryptocurrency that you have ownership of. And the number of people that own MetaMask wallets on their phone has grown from 19 times in 12 months, from January 2020 to July 2021. That again is growth. So all the areas that we have described before about an immersive experience, a persistent community, and a native currency have evidence of immense growth. So if this is where the customers are going, this is how we need to be involved. Now, each of these components that I've described have been loosely referred to as the metaverse. NFTs as it relates to currency, these multiplayer online gaming platforms like Fortnite, and these immersive technologies like Oculus Quest. But the real magic is when they all combine. And whereas these technologies exist individually at the present, it is going to be quite some time before they all combine together seamlessly. Until then, we as business people, we as investors need to be aware of the trend in the technology and prepare ourselves to be present. What does preparing ourselves to be present look like? Well, we need to be looking at what crypto assets are doing well in the space. Examples of which are Axie Infinity Token, the Bored Ape Yacht Club, and Decentraland. These are easy Google searches to get yourself familiarized with. There are the public companies that are developing the technologies, like Microsoft, like NVIDIA, that are doing the 3D chips that are creating these next level graphics, and Meta, formerly Facebook, that have been making these VR technology goggles. And then you have the private companies like Yuga Labs, like Larva Labs, like Epic Games, that are publishers of the Fortnite game that I spoke about just now, that are creating the experiences that the markets, that young people are flocking into, and creating these audiences that businesses of tomorrow have to be interested in. Now, Dr. Manza spoke about pitfalls before, but there are some additional pitfalls we have to look out for. Rug pulls, where we have to be watching out for the reputation of developers in the space who promise things but don't deliver on it. We have to be very careful of how we invest our money into these tokens. The regulations that govern tokens and how these tokens are used as investment instruments. We have to be careful of how we operate within the laws of our country in these new concepts of money. And we have to be careful of robbers, and that categorizes scammers, hackers, and persons who are looking for individuals who do not manage their identity properly and use that opportunity to represent you in the metaverse and steal from you and other people who trust you. These are important problems to be aware of right now. But for now, let's discuss. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Winston. Bringing the example of the local environment was very insightful and helpful. Ricardo, how do you see JN Bank utilizing this new technology as Winston has encouraged us to do? Do you have any ideas of where the technology could take JN, the JN Group, and JN Bank in particular?
Thank you, Alan, for that question, and thank you, Dr. Manza, Mr. Wilkins, great presentation, and to the rest of the persons attending. Now, I think both presenters did a great job in explaining the basic concept of the metaverse. However, if you take us back to the original thing of technology, it's really to enhance an experience. If you think about the first time a computer came into Jane, it was to basically make the organization become more efficient so we could give more better service. So if you think about the metaverse, and I think somebody touched on it, we are known as the #1 mortgage institution in Jamaica. And from time to time, you're very busy and a property might be for sale. And instead of rushing the car to get there to look at that property, I could be here in my office, put on one of those nice virtual headsets, put on, and then they're walking through that property with my mortgage officer along with the realtor. And they're discussing, okay, is this enough bedrooms for the family? You know, where could my kids be playing? And I could be an avatar in that space. Now, that is one that comes to mind. However, if you think about one of our main purpose as an entity, which is really to empower persons financially and otherwise, we have a huge diaspora connection. So there are many Jamaicans living in the United States, Canada, Cayman, and several other corridors. And it would be so good if they could go to a jail in this metaverse. So for example, like Dr. Manza could be a Jamaican or a Dr. Jamaican, and she's interested in doing business with JN Bank. She would then put on her virtual equipment. I remember she says both hardware and software. And through that equipment, she could now interface with an employee who's also in that virtual space. So even though one person is in Canada, the other person is here in Jamaica. And through that, as she rightfully said, it will be enhanced digital representation of what we would normally do when we're face to face. So I could feel, look at the body language, all of that would be simulated by the hardware, looking at, okay, he blinked his eyes, so the avatar would blink the eyes too, you know, and having a very meaningful discussion as to how Jane could financially empower, as opposed to just having a very flat video conversation like what we're having today. All right. So in terms of sales and marketing, there is definitely opportunity for Jane. But before I go on, I believe we should also go back to the rising security threats, because even outside of the metaverse, as you know, there are many threats facing our members. For example, malware, phishing attacks, ransomwares, where people basically encrypt your computer and basically want you to pay. And then the issue of identity theft comes to mind. And I think both Dr. Manza and Mr. Wilkins actually touched on it. And this is why it's so important that that whole onboarding process, having that identity established before you enter the metaverse, is very important. And I think even you, Alan, touched on it when you mentioned privacy, because at the end of the day, whatever conversation you are having, it should be recorded distant and not somebody pretending to be recorded distant in the metaverse. Last but not least, in terms of the benefit for us, when you look at efficiencies, because it now means that as an organization, we could have staff all over the world, and it's like they're here sitting beside me, working, collaborating, just like Dr. Manza spoke about surgery being done in a simulator, engineers working together to build. Just imagine a team of us working together to come up with a new product to basically empower our people, whether it's a new credit facility or it's a new deposit product to help persons save towards their own home. These are things that the metaverse can do for the organization. And more importantly, how do you pay for service? I mean, we touch on it in terms of crypto, but even our own central bank here is launching CBDC, which is the central bank digital currency, where in this digital enhanced experience environment, you could now use this currency to now pay for service. So you could probably even make a deposit in that same virtual space where, you know, Dr. Manza is over in Canada, I'm here in Jamaica, we're discussing her taking a mortgage, and she used the cryptocurrency or the digital currency and pay for that service and start the process. So these are all opportunities for the Jane Group, and that is why we have started a series of communication like this one to basically empower people and to answer different questions.
Thank you, Ricardo. There's a question Why is the banking sector, with the exception of NCB, reluctant to have customers have easy access to acquire crypto assets? Do you have any
Comment for that? Yes.
do you have any insights into what JN Bank is doing with respect to crypto for our members and clients?
All right. So the first thing we need to understand, to access any digital currency, whether it's crypto or a central bank, meaning that it's backed by an organization, you need a wallet. So that's the first thing. Now, as you are well aware, most wallets are provided by institutions that are not regulated. Now, when you're a regulated institution like Jane and any of the other financial institutions here in Jamaica, it means if something goes wrong with that wallet or whatever, you know where to go to. You can also file a complaint with the central bank. So one thing the sector is looking at, and if you look at even the cybersecurity policy coming out of the central bank for digital currency, it speaks about how do we protect our people. So that's the first thing that the sector is trying to do, making sure that we have the right framework and regulation so that whenever we do decide to enter into this space, it will be a very safe one for the users. And if you think back, it's just recently that you're seeing more financial institutions overseas that are allowing crypto to be part of their delivery. So for example, not all the banks in Canada provide access to crypto. Not all the banks in the United States do, but they would have gone through a very rigorous process of basically equipping their different systems, informing their people, getting their staff on board, working with the regulation, so that once you enter into that space, you can be safe and protected. And at the end of the day, once you get access to this, you know where to go should you encounter any issue. So it's a new territory. And I'm sure with the continued work of the regulators, along with other entities, eventually we will get there because it's not going anywhere. It is here to stay. And it is the way of the future, but we just have to ensure that we have the right controls in place. And I think the CBDC, which is the central bank digital currency, is the first step of getting there, where each institution may want to have their own wallet, and you'll also have interoperability where I can move money from my wallet to your wallet, irrespective of whatever institution you are doing business with.
Yeah, that's a very good point about regulation. Because I think that's what we really want our members and clients and participants here to understand that, Jamaicans should already be very wary of the next best thing because we had the experience of cash plus and so on in our past. And even very recently, John Terry and some other, Neymar and some other very prominent footballers and ex-footballers backed an NFT startup with a lot of profile and fanfare. And recently, the value of those investments went to zero. So we can't put upon enough to our clients and potential investors that we have to be very careful when we hear about these things and not just rush into them. Winston, for you, do you have a personal experience with the metaverse that you'd like to share with our listeners?
Yeah, in a couple of ways. I've experienced the metaverse as we have it now in each of its different parts. So I've done demonstrations at Facebook with their VR goggles when they just came out with the Oculus Quest. It was extremely immersive. People talk about this whole motion sickness feeling. You get around that very quickly. The way that you communicate, that person's communicated with you, you felt like you were in the room with them. You lost the sense that you were talking to somebody over the internet, and it just felt like it was somebody else in the room with you. What was also ironic is that even though all of the characters were cartoons, you felt okay because you didn't feel out of place because you looked at your hands and you were also a cartoon too. So it was very easy to get lost in this idea that I was no longer let's say, alien to this environment. I felt native to that environment. So that's from the virtual immersive experience. I've also done trading in or exchange of crypto for services and exchange for one crypto versus another. And those didn't have border restrictions associated with it. So I didn't have to be restricted to Jamaica in order to interact with somebody who was in another country. So there were no borders or scale in that regard. And then from the standpoint of the persistent community, I participated in Fortnite Battle Royale competitions, Call of Duty, Battle Royale experiences. And even though they weren't decentralized, they were being run by a company itself, you felt that sense of community. You ended up meeting people that you've met last week in the same game, and you could continue these conversations. So you felt like you were a part of a community, even though you've never met these people before. So I could see all of these things coming together seamlessly in one reality way down the line. But I do understand there's a lot of back end wiring up that needs to happen in order for that future to be a reality. For now, I just enjoy each piece of it for its own merit.
Thank you, Winston. And participants and members and clients, we have about 8 more minutes. We at Jane are very respectful of your time, and we promised you that we're going to end at 7:30. I'm going to ask Dr. Manzo if she, without obviously giving any investment advice, do you have any, what would you say are the most exciting areas of investment opportunities that you are aware of through your clients and otherwise in the metaverse?
Obviously, it's falling in 3 sort of different sectors. And by the way, I don't look any differently in metaverse development than I've been talking in terms of blockchain development and the use of these types of evolving technologies for some time. The first, obviously, that differentiates the metaverse potentially from some of the other digital advances are the hardware. So there is no question, a simple online search will show you the exponential growth that they expect in hardware. The secret is going to be picking, the horse to ride. The people who picked, if you're old enough to remember, beta tapes instead of VHS, found out very quickly that you have to get the right horse, and that doesn't necessarily mean the best technology. But there is no question that there is going to be an explosion in the hardware market. Oculus is only a first and just a next step of old technology. There's going to be much, much newer. The second is in the gaming and entertainment sector. One of the things that's happened over the last few decades with sort of increases in disposable income, although it may not feel like that to everyone here, we all tend to have more disposable income than past generations did. And human nature is that we tend to use disposable income for entertainment. And therefore, I think that any investment that is going to occur in sort of gaming, exploitation, next stage of gaming, potentially gambling is going to be sort of suitable. It's a little bit restricted for a lot of institutions to invest in that sector, but the gaming sector need not involve necessarily gambling. And the improved ways of monetizing. So if I'm investing in that sector, I want to find the developers that have a better monetization model, because that's been the downfall in many areas, is that they're not monetizing suitably. My particular area where I'm working with most of my clients and where I tend to see sort of the brightest futures are in applications that support better delivery of goods and services. So whether it is a better way of getting trade finance out, whether it is a better way of doing equipment leasing, whether it is a better way of doing identification and verification, it's the applications that are going to improve the delivery of goods and services, in my view, that are going to be the long stayers. They're going to be the ones that are going to bring long-term value and are going to be able, I think, to monetize suitably over the types of volumes that the services give. I particularly like financial services, supporting apps, obviously, but they're across every sector, food safety, these types of things where the use of a metaverse is going to make things much more rapid in terms of transmitting identification information and so on. So personally, I think you could invest in any one of 3 sectors. I happen to like the third one best because I think it brings the most utility.
Excellent, Dr. Manzo. Thank you for that. Thank you, Ricardo. Thank you, Winston. But just before I turn over to our moderator, Michael, I just want to remind clients who are potential investors that in 1900, in the United States alone, there were hundreds of automobile makers, hundreds of startup companies making this emerging technology and providing investment opportunities to potential investors. And within 10 years or 10 or 15 years, those hundreds of companies had been reduced to 3. Many of the hundreds went bankrupt and investors lost all their money. So the moral of the story is that in terms of the metaverse, we are, as Dr. Manzo said, as Ricardo said, as Winston said, we are in the early phases, the early stages of this technology. And we know for sure that the technology is going to become ubiquitous. But what we don't know is which companies are going to be successful, which platforms are going to be successful, which versions of the gaming platforms are going to dominate. And if you invest early, you have the opportunity for big returns, but you also have the chance of big losses. So with that, I thank you again for listening. And I ask Michael to take us through the final part of the agenda.
Thank you so much, Alan. It's really such a pleasure to hear our panelists. But we've come to the end of another informative discussion on Metaverse and how the technology is helpful and potentially harmful. So I want to, first of all, extend a huge thank you to our speaker, Dr. Manzo, and our panelists who have not only explained the topic, but have also provided insightful tips on how we can maximize the use of the technology and of course the pitfalls to avoid. But of course, I want to say thank you to Mr. Lewis for ably moderating the session. Now for our participants this evening, if you've posed a question that was not answered, our team will be monitoring the chat room and social media to answer all these questions. So we'll try our best, and I'm seeing quite a number still in the chat. We were not able to answer all of them. So you can still pose those questions there. And while that is happening, we now will be having a poll on our screen, which I encourage you to participate in, as it will assist us in planning our next event, which we hope to tailor to meet your needs. So we know that we have over 230 participants now on screen, and encourage you to, all of you, to please let us have your frank discussion. We invite you to participate, and let's get this going so that we can know what else. Already we see in the chat where persons have been asking us, Dr. Manzo, you've seen where persons are asking some serious questions about the next session, about some possible topics that we can have. You know, it's really interesting to find out what our clients really want to know about. And already we are seeing the chat, the poll lighting up. Yes, we see people are actually answering those questions, and we're encouraging you to do it. No, I see Dr. Manzo and the panelists looking at the results as they are there coming in. We see more excellent at question number 1. How would you rate your overall experience at this event? I see where, you know, was the topic explored enough to allow for a greater understanding? I see a whopping 86% and growing saying yes. That's a good sign. And of course, the third question is which of the speakers you found most informative? I see Dr. Manzo. I guess I don't know if it's because he didn't drive a Tesla or what it is, but I see that our participants are actually answering the question accordingly. You know, the fourth question asks, did the event meet your expectations? There's a whopping 93% so far saying yes. And of course, the fifth and final question to this poll is, which topic would you like us to focus on our next event? We're asking persons to indicate the topic in the chat. And already we've seen persons really giving us their first choice and as well as their second choice. So there's a 60-40 going on right now. So there's a ding dong going on right now. So thank you so much for participating so far. We already have for the 5 questions, 97 of the 204 potential respondents actually answering. So we're encouraging you to get on and let us know what's happening to you. I see Garcia Swabing said the session was very enlightening. Certainly we'll be following this much closer. Thank you, team. Well done. I agree with you, Garcia. And of course, Lydia is talking about Lydia Shaw, blockchain/crypto. That's a big talk. Whenever we go on these sessions, that's what keeps coming up. Cryptocurrency is the next thing that everybody wants to learn about. Now, I'm taking the opportunity while this poll is going on to advise you that we will be sending the link to this evening's presentation in our welcome email to you. So please look out for that. And in a few days, you should be able to see it. Now, if you don't see the email coming into you, go in your junk email and make sure that you remove it from there and respond to us. Yes. So we're still seeing 111 of the 195 respondents, 56%, actually answering the poll. Invite you to keep on the poll. So let's keep going. All right. In the meantime, while the poll is running, I want to thank you for your participation in the poll so far, those who've participated so far. But in the interim, on behalf of the Jane Fund managers and the Jamaica National Group, I wish to thank you all for attending this event and hope that this evening's session, Welcome to the Metaverse, was informative and insightful. I'm Michael Andre Collins, and it's been my pleasure to have moderated today's session. We now look forward to seeing you at our next event. What will the topic be? What will that topic be? We hope to invite Dr. Manza to come back. And we also want to make sure that our other panelists will be here. We want to make sure that Ricardo Distant, our Chief Digital Transformation and Special Projects Chief at Jane Bank, will be here with us to continue this conversation. And of course, we would want to see Winston Wilkins, Lead Research Analyst at MC Systems, being here to continue with the conversation. We don't know who will be our next panelist, but we want to say thank you so much. And so far, we have 111 of the 186 persons polled here, and want to say thank you and be safe while you traverse the internet and the metaverse. Have a good evening. Good night.
Thank you, Mikey. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you too.